Awesome. Okay, so variables. Think back to, I don't know, was it junior high when you take algebra? Um, uh, and you learn you create variables and you use them in equations. So you might have something like, let me go down here, x equals 5, and then you'll have some formula that says 2 plus x equals 7 or something like that. We're kind of doing that, but in a different way. We're not necessarily taking a formula to solve a problem like that. What we're doing here is we're giving code names, variable names. So I just made up, there is no X in P5, like any automatic variable name. I could name this, like puppy equals 5, and that will be fine. So we're giving names to values so that it makes it a lot easier in our code to, if we give our variables names that make sense, then it's so much easier to read our code, and then we can manipulate that number and change it over time to create different effects, to make it easier to draw things, to animate, to loop through things and do iterations and things like that. So you already touched on variables. Last time we did mouse X and we did mouse Y and width and height. So these are variables that are already like included with P5, that you get them for free, basically. But they function the same way, that they have a value, and that value actually changes over time. So let me put this okay, let me back up again. So when we want to start using variables, there's 3 steps that go into creating a variable. Is first you declare it. Second, initialize. We need to initialize it, and third, we need to actually use it. We don't have to do the third. We can make a variable and never actually use it anywhere. I don't know why you want to do that, but it is possible. But really, the third step is to actually implement it into your code. So first, declaration. We're going to, for our purposes here, we're going to go to the very top, and we're going to declare our variables at the very beginning of the program so that we can use them later. And I'm doing it outside of the setup and draw loop, and I'll explain that later. So the first thing we need to do is tell the computer what we're about to declare. We're about to declare a variable. So we are going to type the word let, and then space, and then the name of the variable. I'm going to say line X, and then semicolon. And what that does is it tells the computer, okay, there's a value that I want to keep track of here. So set aside some space in memory so that I can start using that and manipulating it. Now we're using the word let. You may very well come across code that uses the word var, V-A-R. That's the old way. It kind of makes more sense, really. I kind of like var better, var for variable. But there were some updates to JavaScript a few years ago, and now we're using let. That's what we're using. Basically the same thing. There's a slight difference between them, but we don't need to get into it. There's one more called Const, and that's, you would do that before declaring a variable, but we're not going to worry about that. That's used when it's for consistent, or it's used when you're never going to change the value of variable. But for our purposes, we're just going to use the word let. So right now we've declared it. We're going to say, hey, here's the variable name. We're going to use it later on. And then down here, we're going to initialize that variable. In this case, I could do it in the setup or I could do it in the draw. So remember the way these two functions work is setup runs once at the very beginning when the program is started, and draw loop basically runs forever. It just goes on and on and on. You know, until you shut it off or your computer crashes or, you know, whatever. So now I'm going to initialize it here and I'm going to say line X. I don't need to say let anymore. I've already declared it. I'm going to say line X equals 20. Okay. Let me get rid of this. Okay. So now line X. Now, when we say equals here, this is called an operator. This whole thing is called an assignment. We're assigning a value to X. We're not necessarily evaluating, you know, is X 20? We'll do that in different ways, but we're assigning a value to X. So I'm going to introduce you to a new little friend here called the console. And we can't see it right now, but it's a little window that will display data for you. It doesn't, nothing's going to happen to your sketch. It's just a way to like peer into what's happening in the background and sort of debug and things like that. So in order to access the console, I'm going to type console .log. And then what happens here is whatever I type inside these parentheses shows up in the console. So I could just say, you know, hello world, and put parentheses around it because I wanted to recognize it just as a string of text, not as a variable or a function or anything like that. And now when I run this, this console pops up here and, you know, it's just going to display whatever's between the parentheses. And you can see this number ticking upwards like that. That's because this is drawing forever and we're drawing at about 60 frames a second. So this is how many times that line of code is being executed. So what's really handy is here is that if I'm not sure what's going on in my program, I can monitor a variable by typing it into here. So I'm going to say line X and then run it. And line X, wait, why did it? Oh yeah, hello world is just still there. I can clear the console here. Let's run that again. Oh, if console disappears, there's a little icon down here that tells you that it's running. So like it's showing me line X equals 20 because that's what I set line equals X. But the beauty of variables is that you can change them over time. So I'm going to say line X again here, and I'm going to change it to 30. And now when I run it, now line X equals 30. So we can monitor, for example, sometimes it's helpful to monitor maybe something that changes over time, like the mouse X. So now we're getting different values based on where the mouse X is here. Not the mouse Y, but the mouse X. So this is really, really helpful. I encourage you to use this a lot because if you just don't know what the hell is going on with your program, just throw a few variables into the console and it just might reveal something that you just weren't thinking of. Like, oh, that is not what I expected. Those numbers don't make sense. So that's your new best friend is console.log. So let me actually use this variable. I'm gonna comment that out. Actually use it, make it useful. So let's draw a line with this line. I'm just going to draw a line up and down the screen. So I'm going to say I'm going to use line X for the X position and then 0 at the top, then line X bottom height and run that. And now I've got one line going up and down the screen. And I could also make a variable for 0 and height if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that right now. So one of the beautiful things about variables is that you do want them to change over time. And a lot of times we're running code over and over again. So this is called incrementing. We do that a lot in programming. We increment things over and over again. So let's say I wanted a series of lines that go across the screen. Well, what if, let's console log again. What if I write something like this? I'm not using it yet. I'm just going to demonstrate. Line X equals line X plus 20. Okay, this looks a little weird. You wouldn't do this in like algebra. This doesn't really make any sense because this is assignment. Now I'm saying take the value of this variable and add 20 to it, and now assign that variable back, that value back into the variable. So in this case, it would be 20 plus 20, so we would be 40 right there. So it's 40. So this, reassignment, think of variables as like a bucket or a jar. I'm making a bucket and I'm labeling it line X, and then whatever I put in that bucket is line X. That is its value. That is what it is. So this can be really helpful. This incrementing. So let me demonstrate why. Let's say I wanted 2 lines next to each other. I can use the variable to make that a lot easier. And so first I'm drawing the first line, and I'm using the variable to control the X position. Then I increment the X position, and then I draw the line again using the same exact variable. I don't have to declare another variable to draw the next line. So now I have 2 lines. So then I could do something like, repeat this several times. I'm starting to get this series of lines that, if I keep repeating it, I could get it to go all the way across the screen. And you might be saying to yourself right now, like, that's a lot of repetition. And I think I heard her say once that if you find yourself repeating code, there's probably an easier way to do it. That's when we get into loops. We're going to tell the computer to execute something over and over and over again in a loop. But right now we're kind of doing it the long way. So now you see something in here that happening over and over again. I'm using this number 20 over and over again. I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe, let's say I wanted to change the spacing of these lines here. Maybe I want to experiment with different spacing. So maybe we could create a variable called spacing. And let me show you there's a quick way to, you got those 2 steps, declaring and initializing. JavaScript will let you do them at the same time if you want to. So I'm just going to go ahead and declare and initialize at the same time. And I'm going to change this to 40. I'm going to put it as 40. Nothing's going to happen yet because I haven't used that. But now if I change this 20 to my spacing variable, I can control, all I have to do is change one number somewhere, and I've controlled all of these lines. And actually, I'm going to change this one right here, because see how it's not coming 60 away from the side. So I'm actually going to change that to spacing. So I get these even spaces beside them. And then I can do things like, what if, I could do things like make spacing instead of declaring it, initializing it here, what if I wanted to make spacing equal the mouse? And I probably want to bring that down a bit. So I'm saying mouse divided by 20. So I get better numbers. And now I can stretch this out as I move the mouse across the page. So I'm sort of, you can assign one variable to another variable so that they kind of match, or they have some sort of relationship with each other. So that's a really useful way to do it. Any questions? Any questions about this? Anything a little confusing?
I just needed a clarification.
Uh-huh.
So let is basically setting like a specific variable for all of the commands that you are going to put in the like throughout the code.
It's just saying, hey, I'm creating a variable now. I'm going to, there's a value that I want to keep track of, and I want to name it. And then you're going to use it throughout the code. Does that make sense? You're just saying, hey, I'm gonna use a variable and I'm naming it this, and then I'm gonna give it a value and then use it throughout the code. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah. And
then,
let me show you real fast. Well, the reason I'm putting them up at the top, and this will come into play later down the road, is that there's a thing called variable scoping. And what that means is if I put them at the very top, they're called global variables, which means they're available to any function, all the functions throughout the program. If I declare a variable inside of a function, it's only available inside of that function. So normally we put them at the top so we can use them throughout the program. That's why they're not actually inside of a function. But sometimes you want to declare them inside of a function. Maybe you're using the same name for variable lots of times and you only need it in one specific place. So yeah, so there's that. It's called global variables. Let me show you another fun trick that you can add to your code to add some randomness to things. So let's say instead of declaring the spacing here, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say random spacing equals, and I'm going to use a random function. It's a function that will give you a random number. So I'm going to say random, and what you put inside the parentheses, if you don't put anything inside the parentheses, you're going to get a number between 0 and 1. So it's a decimal number. But if I put a number in here, I'm going to get a value from 0 to that number. So let's say I put 100 in here. So when the program first runs, it's going to assign spacing anywhere between 0 and 100. So now every time I run this program, I'm getting a different result here. See that? If you give it two numbers, you can control the range. So if I said something between 50, 100, instead of 0 to 100, it's 50 to 100. So it's, never going to get really small. It's going to stay large. And this could be useful sometimes if you want. You can get into negative numbers, like say you want it between 5 and -5. That can be really useful if you want something to kind of stay centered around 0. That can be really useful. Another fun thing to do that you can experiment with is I'm going to introduce you to another function down here just for fun. We actually, you don't have to use this in the exercise we're doing today, but there's an event function called mouse pressed. Oops. Mouse pressed, and it's the same syntax. We've got parentheses and then curly brackets. And then what I could do is I could take this code right here, and remember it's only running once in setup. And if I put it here, let's put it back at 100. Every time I press the mouse, it's going to change the spacing variable to a different random number. So now every time I click on it, I'm getting a different value here. And that's kind of fun. Let's change it from 100 to width. So, oh wait, no, we don't want width because that would be, it'll go off the screen. Okay, we'll leave it at 100. So that's kind of fun. We can play with that. What else about numbers? I've showed you console. I've showed you incrementation. Oh, let me show you another programming convention that you'll see used a lot. This right here, line x equals line x plus spacing. The truth is you don't actually see it written like that very much because there's a shortcut to it. And that is, you're going to see this plus equals. This is exactly, this right here is exactly the same as this right here. It just saves you some typing. So plus equals means take the value and add this value to it. So I can take this and replace all of these with plus equals. And so that's what you're going to see in code most of the time, and then run it. Another shortcut is if you just want to increment by 1, it's just plus plus. And you do that a lot. You just increment by 1 along the way. But we did that right now, we would just get solid white because it would just draw a line at each pixel. So we want a different value there, but that's another shortcut. There's a name for this. I can't remember what it's called. But yeah. Okay. So I've got, I think 3 little exercises for you that just using variables. They're pretty simple. They're so simple that I don't even have screenshots for you. You can just read the instructions. So under exercises 131 here, it's pretty simple. I want you to draw a circle to the screen. Actually want you to put it, I should have written this, put it in the middle of the screen using the width. If you remember last time, if we use the width divided by 2, we can get the value of the exact center of the screen on the X. So draw a screen, a circle to the middle where there's absolutely no numbers in there, except maybe the divided by 2 for width divided by X. But everything else is a value. So you're not putting a number for the X or the Y. You're not putting a number for the width or the height of the variable. You're using of the circle. You're using variables for all of those. And then after that, I want you to use that same code and draw 3 more circles next to it, taking advantage of those variables that you created. So actually, the truth is, let me demonstrate this for you probably want to put the X into a variable because that's what you're going to be changing up. Let me demonstrate this. So if I said rect, rect, and then I'm going to want a width, height, and an X, Y, and a width. I probably want to declare my width somewhere up here. So I'd do something like rect W equals width divided by 2 so that I'm starting out with that variable, but I want to change it as we go along. So actually, no, let me put that down here. And then, no, not rect width, sorry, rect X. And then down here, I would say rect X. And then I would make one for Y, although I haven't created it yet. So I'm going to get an error here and then rect width and rect width or something like that. Let me just create. Oh, I didn't declare it. Oops. Rect X. Let rect Y. Now, one thing up here is that I showed you how you can declare and initialize a variable all in one line. In this case, we can't, because if we said width divided by 2, we're running a function and we haven't actually set up the program yet. The program hasn't even started, so those functions aren't even available. So we're going to get an error up here if we do that. So we're going to have to initialize them in setup. Same thing with random. Random is a function. If you try to use it up above before the setup function, you're going to get an error. So I'm going to say rect W. I get it again. Rect X equals width divided by 2. Rect Y equals height divided by 2. And now this should work. Let's see. Oh, I got an error here. So the console is really helpful here. Rect, oh, I didn't declare width. We'll do that. Let rect width equals, I don't know, 100. Now I'm getting a circle and it's drawing to the center there. So that should really help you out with the first one. So I'm drawing a rectangle with nothing but variables. So all the values that I'm using to draw the rectangle are included in variables. So that should help you out with the first one, drawing a circle to the screen. The next is draw 3 more circles. So you're going to use those variables to, and then you're going to have to manipulate them a little bit to draw another circle right next to the first one, and then a third one right next to the other one. And I encourage you to do something like create a spacing variable like I created with those lines to control, so that you can control the spacing between the circles by only changing one variable. All you have to do is go up at the, go to the initialization and just change that number, and the spacing between the circles changes. So that's your second one. And then the third one is I want you to draw a target symbol. So that would simply be like whatever color you want, like a black circle and a white circle, then a black circle and white, whatever, draw a target, what a target looks like, and draw it in a way where you're using all variables, and that you can, it's very similar to number 2, that you can change the size of the target by only manipulating one variable. And if you want to put it on the mouse press, that would be fun. So the otherwise, every time, if you just do it at the top, it'll change every time you run the program. You're gonna, as you change that variable, or you could set it to random if you want, but some way where you can control the size of the target symbol through only one variable. Does this make sense? Do you think you can accomplish this?
Are we setting like a value to the variables and then
Yeah, you'll have to go through those 3 steps of declaring the variable,
then
initializing it, giving it a value, and then using it by actually putting it into the drawing, the circle function to draw a circle, the ellipse function to draw a circle. So yeah, you're going to need to declare and initialize variables. And sometimes you do that all in one line, or sometimes you declare at the top and initialize somewhere else.
And then for the last one, is it just any variable that we're changing?
You can name it whatever you want. You can create as many variables as you want. The only rule is that you can't start with a number, and you can't have any spaces in it. What's really common is to use camel casing in JavaScript and other languages. So if I were declaring, let's say I wrote this whole thing out, rect width, to start the first word with a lowercase and the second word with an uppercase, and any other words with an uppercase, it's called camel casing. That's the convention, but I mean, you can, it's not set in stone. You can name your variables whatever you want. All you need to do is take a look at what you're actually doing, what function you're actually calling, and then if you're calling a circle function, that you're going to need 4 values to put in there. So determine how many variables are you going to need to run that function, and those are the variables that you're going to have to invent, basically. Does that help?
A little.
A little. I'll help you as you go along. That's why we do these during our class session. So if you get stuck, I can help you out with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So then go ahead and I've created a new collection on our page here. So There's collection 3 at the bottom, variables and loops. So go ahead and add, remember to fork your sketch because you might be building on like the second one is building on the first one. And then fork your sketch and save it, and then add it to this collection here. Number 3. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, go ahead and get started here. And I'm hanging out here. If if the concept's hard to understand, I'm happy to go through it as many times as possible. Okay. There you go. And give me 1 minute because I'm going to get some more coffee. Okay, I'm back.
Professor?
Huh?
Oh, I didn't know if you knew you were sharing your screen. I don't know if you want us looking at all your emails.
Oh my God, thank you. I should probably stop recording too.